Hi, Amber. We're gonna take a look at your postings for the rhythm and repetition, as well as the Notan projects. So let's just kind of get right into the rhythm and repetition. Taking a look at what we have. Looks like a half a photo there. I'm not sure what's going on there. Alternating, progressive rhythms. Um, Kind of strange what's going on here with some of these formatting. I'm not sure if we're cropping some of these or not. We don't want to get into doing that, of course, because those look somewhat not quite what we want to do. That said, let's take a look at some of these images. The alternating rhythm. I mean, something like this can definitely work. I mean, we have alternating rhythms in a lot of different ways. Just pointing out what the alternating rhythm is, back and forth, back and forth. You've got the duality. You got the alternating rhythms happening between these two elements here, because you got them in the shoe, you've got them in these laces here, you've got them in these laces here. You don't quite have it going on anywhere else. And what we have here is a lot of what we call passive negative space. This is this kind of emptiness here that's not necessarily contributing to the entire sort of composition. What is it saying to the viewer? How is it contributing to the overall message that you're attempting to communicate? That is what we want to address. We start to get into that. Of course, we get into that in the other project with the Notan. With the Notan. We also explored it a bit in the previous project, which was the golden ratio and using the phi grid, because there we're using the entire picture plane. It's very important to always consider the entire shape that we're working with, so we don't wind up with elements that are just sort of floating around in space, right? Now, the space between this here and here is very important also. You've got a really kind of cool thing going on right here. If we had isolated the image really tight here, this space would become much more active. It'd become much more a part of the whole composition. And then this gesture that you captured, which is really kind of interesting, would make more impact on what we're looking at. So, pay very close attention to the entire picture plane. Here we're doing it. Here we're doing it. Whoop, come on. Here we're doing it. In this image, I see you're attempting to do it, but you're doing it via cropping the image in a really exaggerated and peculiar way. Or you've used some sort of panoramic mode of some sort in your camera. We want to use one format throughout the projects. That way they don't jump around from image to image. That doesn't have anything to do with the quality of this image itself, which is quite interesting. I like what you're doing in terms of the exploration of the format, meaning I appreciate the effort in trying to make this kind of thing work. When I say like, I don't mean at all preference. I mean appreciate more, meaning what you're doing with the aesthetics and what you're doing with the kind of experiment. That said, we want to stick with one format when we're working. If you want to go with all your images done this way, have at it. Let's go for it. Be a real challenge, but let's keep with it. That way you're exploring this the entire time. And we don't want to jump around. Here, it's a very one note, except for what you're doing here with the shadow. We get into that in the next project. You see how it is contributing here. If it were more a part of what's going on, I think it would be better off with it. Again, we're getting into the cropping kind of situation where we want to be careful with that, not do that. That said, you are capturing a couple of these moments where it breaks up this rhythm very nicely, very kind of subtle, but what it does is it draws the eye from one side of the image to the other side. This kind of pattern that gets set up that way is an important thing to understand and to be reminded of. These kinds of things is called continuance, where our eye grabs this and then our eyes moves around and it's also picked up over here, and our brains will want to tie them together. It's a really kind of a cool phenomenon when you really think about that. So moving into here, it's very good that you are not afraid to kind of work with a kind of a distorted perspective and point of view, turning things on their side and using things just for the geometry of it. Keep doing that. That's absolutely what we want you to do. This is a really strong image as far as the compositional and arrangement, except for the diagonal that you're creating from here to here, splitting the composition in half. Now, normally, we would want to say, go for that when you're working with the alternating rhythm, but not on that dramatic diagonal so much. Because on that dramatic diagonal, what we're doing is we're creating this tension of energy that is just overwhelming the rest of the picture. Basically, we want to avoid that diagonal when we can, unless we have a very equally strong counter angle to work with. But even then, it's really difficult to happen. So if you had taken the same composition and leaned it this way a little bit more, so turned it on its side just a little bit more, you don't need quite a dramatic of an angle to make this work. It could have started here and gone to here, and you still achieve the same energy with less impact on the rest of the composition, left our eyes to still be able to navigate the rest of it. So bear that in mind, just as a kind of, okay, so I want to try to avoid getting things into those corners so aggressively, because what it's going to do is it's going to create arrows pointing the viewer away from the composition. See how this is creating an arrow? Like that. So we have this long shaft here, and it's creating this arrow pointing us directly away. Same thing up at the top. It's got this and the two arrows pointing us away from the composition, which is probably not what you want us to do. You want us to stay in the picture. So if we pacify that just a little bit, it'll help. Let's see. Go back to this one. A really cool idea. I mean, I think this could work if you hold on to it through the entire composition. If you want to do this for a whole project, let's do that. Otherwise, just stick with your regular formatting. This could be a challenge to do that. Image-wise, it's a really successful kind of model of what we're talking about, alternating rhythm here. Are you identifying it as alternating rhythm? No, you're identifying it as progressive rhythm. A progressive rhythm is more what you're doing here. This is a true progressive rhythm, where we're building a movement with the repetition. Notice how the spaces in between each of these is getting smaller as it goes back. That's how we create this rhythm through this repetition. The repetition's still happening, but the repetition is de-escalating in their distance. So that's creating what's called progression, right? It's progressively getting smaller. With this one, the progression isn't really altering enough to make it feel like it's getting smaller. It just feels like a back and forth, which is the alternating version. So just as long as you can understand that, that's what's really important. So these leading line, roped off kind of angles, this is a progressive rhythm that's going on. This kind of gets you into a more of a progressive rhythm. It's starting to move you in this direction in a pretty good way. You're countering that with this, which is more of an alternating rhythm. You're going to notice that you get both, right? You're going to get this sort of opportunity within your images to work with multiple types of rhythms and work to combine them together, or work to emphasize one and de-emphasize another. It's really up to you. You get to sort of manipulate the way that the image is being seen according to what you have to communicate. Of course, we're working with isolating these things so that you can understand them very clearly, but without that kind of exercise, you are looking at a scene where there's pretty much every type of rhythm, all types of rhythms, and you're choosing which one to either emphasize or to de-emphasize. So let's look at what we're getting here. Now you're going for the undulating rhythm here, right? And you do have a really good sort of swoop happening. Whoops, keep bumping my mouse here. You do have this really good swoop. We're getting dangerously close here, but not too bad. Notice how it is that it's not going directly into the corner. It is a much better slope. It's creating a progressive rhythm. Yes, you do have these flags, which are also creating a progressive rhythm. An undulating rhythm might be something that's a little bit more organic and a little bit less regular. We have regular spaces, boom, 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 in this. We have regular spaces in between the flags. The undulating rhythm that is made up of the interior of these flags is definitely there. So that would be your undulating rhythm, not the building, not the flagpoles, but the flags themselves are creating the undulating rhythm. Hopefully you understood that when you made them, that's what they were, that the flags themselves are the undulating rhythm that you're exploring. This, I'm not exactly sure what we're getting at with this one. This one seems a little bit like you're not sure. This is a very good example of the undulating rhythm. It's still one or the other, still tends to be leaning toward either an alternating or progressive rhythm. Undulating will do that. But here, you're getting into the shadow stuff, which a lot of people do anyway before we start the shadow project. But here you're working with the shadows and you can see immediately what it starts to do for you. It starts to pull you away from objects. It starts to create this idea that there is elements there, but without actually having to go forward with them. In that, let's just kind of move to the Notan and see what we have here. Same images. So definitely don't want to include an image in one project and a same image in another project. Please don't, we don't want to do that. A couple of other students did that, and we want to avoid that. So this image, I think, is this image and the other image the same one? No, I don't think they are. Maybe they are. Where am I going? No, they're not. But this and the other one are definitely the same picture. Let's avoid that in the future. That, believe it or not, there is this sort of thing we call the academic honesty kind of thing. And it's not, it's an honest mistake doing it here. But if you were to, for instance, turn a body of work in, that you did in this class and you turn it in for a whole nother class, that's a big deal. You don't want to get into that. It's kind of like plagiarism. So you don't want to avoid that. But in this class, when you post something for a project, that's it. You don't post it for a different project. Also, you don't want to mine your archive. You don't want to go back for photos you've already taken to post them for new experiments. The idea of a new experiment is you go out and you make images for it so that you're learning about it. Also, these are a little too close to one another. Now, I know I've just started off with all these criticisms or all these kind of, points, but these are wonderful images, Emma. These are really, really beautiful. What you're doing with the shadows here is outstanding. I can't say enough about how well you're doing with the shadows here. This is a really, really well seen, organization of shadow work here. You're using them very, very effectively here. This seems to be something that you already are comfortable doing. They're just too close together. This image and this image, they're just too close together to be qualified as two different images. And so are these. These are very close to one another. Just a moving of the camera for about 6 inches, and they're pretty much the same photograph. Choose between the two. We want them to be much different from each other when you're choosing how to put them together. But wow, using the energy that happens from these shadows and then the blankness of what it's on. I mean, this is just cement, right? And you're able to make an image of cement, but activating it in this way is really, that's what we want you to get at in your photography. To be able to take a picture of nothing and to make it valuable, that's what's incredible. That's what really happens when you know the medium extremely well. Here we're getting into some really outstanding botanical photographs. I mean, using the shallow depth of field, the sort of non-fear of letting things be soft focus and then letting it get crisp at the end. These, you probably have been making photos of flowers even previously, because these seem like they're comfortable for you as well. That said, in order to really get to the spirit of the in spaces in between, we need other objects for these things to be reacting with. The whole idea is that we want to get not the objects, but we want to get the interaction of the things that are between those objects. It still feels very much like you're making a photo of a flower, not making a photo of the space between the flower and another space. That was what we were attempting to do with this portion of the project. Spaces in between means you are making a photograph of this, not this and this. So we wanted this to be the emphasis. So if that is so, it would put this at the center of our attention. As it is, I would say this is the center of our attention. I think we could all pretty much agree that this is the center of our attention. What we're trying to do is get this to be the center of attention. That's the challenge. I think you're really close to being able to do that. It's just making you aware of what we're looking at and getting you to move your attention to those spaces rather than the object itself. Why would we want to do that anyway? You might be asking, like, why, what for? Why would we need to do that? The reason is it's going to create more sort of emphasis on the objects themselves. Believe it or not, when you create that sort of highlight, when you can create a balance between spaces in between the objects, it creates an energy that you can't get otherwise. You see, this has got a lot of passive negative space around it. It's not being used. So this is trying to support all of the energy. You're making that flower do all the effort. Whereas if other parts of the image are contributing to the energy, now this flower has less work to do, and so therefore its energy can be more focused, meaning it doesn't have to be the only thing that holds the photo up, meaning makes it interesting. The rest of the composition is doing its part as well. So that's why we want to be able to do it, is because we need all the parts of an image to contribute to it. I think you're doing really well. This group is, as a whole, this class as a whole, I think have a real grasp on a lot of the topics that we're using, and you're no exception here. I just think there are some of the concepts that we need to really focus on. Keep doing them. None of these experiments are meant to make you a master of them. They're meant to introduce you to these ideas for us to explore them, so that then you can continue to explore them as you move forward. That's what an intro class is. That's what 100 level courses are meant to do. They're meant to build the foundation, not to sort of end the foundation. So take this information, move forward with it, and man, I can't wait to see what else you do with these shadow ideas and some of these other things, because you really have a lot of potential here, and I look forward to working with you in the studio some more. So if you have other questions, I'd be happy to answer them face to face. Otherwise, we'll see you in the studio. All right, bye now.